In this episode, we're going to teach you how to take this rusty golf ball sized dent. We're going to show you how to repair it. We're going to grind it, pull it out, fill it, and then we're going to lay down the most beautiful glass-like finish you've ever seen. So let's dig in and get started. What is up? My name's Chris, and this is Garage Noise, where we teach how to build your skill and increase your knowledge about paint and body repair. The first thing we need to do when we straighten this dent is to grind away all that rust and paint and get it ready to pull the dent out. I'm going to use my angle grinder here with a 36 grit roll-lock disc on it. This will be great for removing that rust and getting that paint eliminated. To pull out this dent, we're going to use this budget dent puller called the G90E. To sand the rust deep in the center of this dent, we're going to use this Astro belt sander to get down in there and remove all that rust so we can weld to it properly. When a dent is created, it creates a crown or a high spot around the edge of that dent. So when we're pulling this dent out, we're going to be also knocking down that crown. Now I take the G90E and I weld to the center of this dent. Now I can slide hammer or pull this dent back into shape. Taking a closer look, we can see what remains of the dent. Now we need to clean this up just a little bit. Weld right in the center low spot. We're going to put a little bit of pressure on this and pull it. And as we pull it, we're going to be knocking down the high area or crown that's around this dent. I'll do a few more little micro pulls to clean up any low areas in this dent, and then we'll be ready to prep out for some body filler. I'm grinding away about 3 inches of paint around the outside of this dent. Once we finish grinding the paint, I'm going to grab my Mirka orbital sander with some 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to machine sand the paint around the dent. This is going to promote adhesion for the body filler. Now that we have the dent ready for body filler, we're going to feel over it with the palm of our hand, looking for any high areas that might cause issues when blocking our body filler. If you find any, you want to tap those down just a tad so that the filler will go on smoothly and you can block it straight. The next step is to clean the repair area with some wax and grease remover. Mix your hardener in your filler until it's all one uniform color. On the first swipe of filler, you want to press it into the dent. Lay it down as smooth as possible to help with the blocking process. I'm going to use the orbital sander with some 80 grit sandpaper just to machine sand this body filler down so it's flat. I'm just shaping it, I'm not blocking it straight. Now you can knock this down at home using a block and some 80 grit by hand. It's going to take just a little bit longer. If you're blocking this by hand, you want to go in an X pattern or cross pattern. Even when I'm blocking this with the DA, I'm doing it in kind of an X pattern. I'm going in different directions in order to get this flat. When you're blocking, it's a good idea to mask off the adjacent panels. You don't want to put any sand scratches in the adjacent panels and have to paint those. Now I'm going to grab my small block with some 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to block this straight in an X pattern or cross pattern. We're going to follow the contours of the body in order to get it straight. It's a good idea to use some guide coat to show you any high or low areas while you're blocking. This is just some flat black paint that I'm using while I'm blocking this dent. And as you can see, we do have a few little low areas here where the guide coat remains in those low areas after the first coat of block. Now, if you have enough filler on it, you can block those out. If you block down into bare metal, you need to stop, either knock the high spot down or add some filler to get it straight. So what I'm doing here is I'm blocking around the edge of this body filler. That hard edge, we need to get that smoothed out and a nice transition from the body filler to the rest of the panel. I'm not so much worried about this low area. I know that's going to block out. Okay, now that we've got this shaped very well with the 80 grit sandpaper, we're going to switch over to 180 on the block. 180 is going to cut down those scratches for the 80 grit, and we're going to have to machine sand the rest out here, but we want to start transitioning to 180. I probably went a little bit long and got too many deep scratches with the 80. You don't really want to scratch into the paint too much with an 80 because you got to remove them. So let's go over it with 180, block it some more, and then we'll run a DA around the edge and clean up those 80 grit scratches.
Now we're going to run over it with 320 on the orbital sander. I've removed the interface pad. I just want it to be up against the panel and firm. Started sanding this area with the 320. I want to show you this. You want to remove those 80 grit scratches before you prime, because what happens is that 2K primer will shrink a little bit and it'll shrink into those scratches, and you'll be able to see them underneath the clear and underneath your paint. If you look close there, you can see that is an 80 grit scratch. That is a no-no. You do not want to prime over that. Primer will shrink in that and it will show up, okay? You don't want to leave any pinholes. All those things will show up under your primer, under your paint job, and give you a poor repair. So I'm gonna go over this finish going over this 320, we'll evaluate and take a look at what we have. Okay, now I'm gonna spray it with some prep solvent to remove any dust, and so I can look at these scratches and see where I'm at with getting this prepped out for primer. If you look closely here, we have sand scratches around the edge of this that are deeper than 320. Now I'm going to take my orbital sander with some 600 grit sandpaper and machine sand around this body filler to remove those scratches without digging into the body filler. So there were a few areas where we broke through into bare metal. So what we need to do is spray some self-etching primer on those areas to promote adhesion. I did it with an aerosol can, just a little light coat before we prime. Now we're masking it off, getting it all ready for primer. We're not going to spray the primer right up to the edge of this tape because we don't want to create a hard edge. I am using a 2K urethane primer. This is the Roberlo ME1. If you have any questions or are interested in any of the products or tools I use, check my storefront. The link is in the description. Once we have 2 good coats of primer on it, it's time to block this. Now I'm going to use my flexible block with some 320 grit sandpaper. And of course we need to sand it and block it in an X pattern or cross pattern to get a straight panel. But you want to block with the contours of the body. Don't block right on the body line. I'm blocking up to that body line in order to keep that body line crisp and sharp. And this is where taking the time to get your bodywork straight and as flat as possible is going to pay off. Because once you've primed it, you've put 2 coats of good primer on it, you can block it out once and possibly be done. You may have to put a thin coat of primer on it just as a finish coat, and then you can go over it with 600 grit sandpaper to smooth it out and get it ready for paint. Now Darius is going to use the Mirka sander with 600 grit sandpaper and machine sand all the areas we're going to paint and clear. This is going to promote adhesion for the clear coat in the areas we're not putting paint. When masking this vehicle, I do the door jamb first, putting foam tape to eliminate overspray in that jamb. Then what I'll do is I'll outline the panel with the masking tape, and we'll run plastic over this entire vehicle, cutting out the areas we're painting. Make sure to sand all the edges to promote adhesion. I use 600 grit sandpaper. Now it's time to mix up some paint. This paint is Nason paint. It mixes up 2 to 1, 2-part paint, 2 parts reducer. I am using the 3M Performance gun. This is a new gun to me with different tips for different applications. If you haven't checked out the review and demo, check it out. I'll leave a link at the end. So now what we're doing is we're just putting the first coat of base over the primered areas. We're going to get it nice and covered. It's going to take about 3 coats, and then we're going to start the blending process where we're blending out a little bit away from the primer. And as you can see, I'm pulling back just a little bit on the blend. We don't want paint right up against that panel if we can help it. I'm spraying this gun at 20 psi with the fan pattern almost wide open. I have my volume set wide open as well. And if you need some more detailed instructions on blending paint or gun settings, check out the links at the end of this video. Now it's time to lay some clear. I am using the Valspar V Series clear. I did leave links to 2 different types of clears in the description. Both perform very well. As we're laying this clear, we want to make sure we're overlapping 70%. You want to have a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel, usually 3 to 5 inches or 4 to 5 inches for clear coat. I did bump up the air pressure on this gun to 24 psi. And I am using the 1.2 tip on this 3M Performance gun, and that's what I find gives me the best results.
The second coat of clear coat here is where we want that good looking glass-like finish. So we're evaluating the clear coat as we're laying it down, making sure we're getting that finish. If we need to make any adjustments, we can bump up the volume or dial down the volume just a little bit to get that glass-like finish. Listen up. If you need instruction on specific topics, check out my YouTube channel and my other how-to videos. And if you like this content, please like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss anything. I appreciate watching. We'll see you next time.